Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see so many of you here this afternoon. I am Lauren Henry, Executive Director of UChicago Alumni and a proud alumna of the college and a 20th reunion celebrant, I am supposed to say. Thank you. I just want to start by saying how amazing this community is for showing up here for Alumni Weekend, but also for the ways that you are engaging with the university, championing the university, and just like showing up for the university every day, right? Whether you're like wearing the sweatshirts or you're emailing us to tell us what you think, all of those things, we're so grateful. And our time together this afternoon is really highlighting another thing that I think we're all really grateful for, which is how the university's commitment to free expression is shaping our next generation of university alumni. I know issues surrounding free speech are complex and challenging in the best of times, but our community is really lucky to have a strong North Star in the Chicago principles in a moment where finding a path to rigorous discourse that advances understanding is particularly salient. Today's discussion was produced in partnership with Chicago's Forum for Free Inquiry and Expression and features students who will be graduating from the university this year, so we're almost alumni. And they're going to share their insights into the challenges to free speech that they have encountered both on campus and in broader society. Today's panelists are Noel Carver, who is the Social Sciences Division Chair of the Chicago Forum's student group, who will be graduating. They'll all be graduating. He'll be graduating with a master's in social sciences. Demarius Amarian Johnson, who is college co-chair of the Chicago Forum and will be graduating from the college in about a month. Arian Potvin, who represents the Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice and will be graduating from Crown. Max Reisman, the other college co-chair who will be graduating from the college, and Elizabeth Snyder, another college alum and co-president of the Chicago Forum. And the conversation will be facilitated by Tom Ginsberg, who's the Forum's founding faculty director. He is also the Leo Spitz Distinguished Service Professor of International Law. His work focuses on comparative and international law from an interdisciplinary perspective. Professor Ginsberg currently co-directs the Comparative Constitutions Project, an effort funded by the National Science Foundation to gather and analyze the constitutions of all independent nation-states since 1789. Before teaching law, he served as a legal advisor at the Iran-U.S. Claims Tribunal and The Hague, and continues to work with numerous international development agencies and foreign governments on legal and constitutional reform. And with that, please join me in welcoming Professor Ginsberg, Noel, Darius, Ariane, Max, and Elizabeth.
Well, thanks to everyone for coming today. It's just a pleasure to be here. As was said, I'm the founding faculty director of the Forum for Free Inquiry and Expression, and it's our second year of operation. We actually launched on October 6th, 2023. That was our big launch date, which for those who might remember that day, it was like the very end of that was the start of the latest round of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and a very challenging year. I think it's safe to say for free expression in all American universities, that challenge continues to unfold with the current administration's various efforts to try to bring universities in line. One of the great things this year from the Chicago Forum's point of view has been the creation and empowerment of our Student Advisory Board under the leadership of my colleague Tala Mountjoy, who's here in the front row. We could not have imagined, but in retrospect was just a really obvious thing, that if you give University of Chicago students some ability to do things, if we can empower our students, great things will happen. And what we've had all year with Student Advisory Board members in all parts of the university, all different units, is just a ton of great ideas and execution of events which respond to what they feel are the important issues of the day. And it's just really enriched, I think, the entire campus. So I myself want to thank all of you for all your leadership there. If I could give you a standing ovation, I would, but it would distract from the flow of the conversation. So what I want to do actually is start with each of you and ask you, what is it that drew you to the Chicago Forum and on free expression? And we'll start with you, Darius.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. What drew me to the Student Advisory Board for the Forum was really my desire to promote a very civil and respectful form of discourse that my peers could participate in. And I think more importantly, I knew at the time that I was at the University of Chicago, and there was this thing that seemed like a myth at the time called the Chicago Principles floating around. Like everyone was talking about it, but no one can tell me what it was. Um, but fortunately, when I learned about the Student Advisory Board, I knew that this was my moment, a moment like no other, where I could be a part of this tool, this necessary education that I feel has shaped my experience in the college, at least for the last year for sure, and hopefully has enlightened the knowledge and the education of my peers so that they can go out into the world and engage in civil, respectful, and rigorous discourse.
Terrific. Noel.
So much like my colleague here, I arrived, I'd heard of the mythology of University of Chicago, and I believed in it partially, very hopefully. I came and looked around here after I was accepted to decide whether this is the offer I was going to take up. And just walking around campus, I heard people heatedly discussing things that I'm afraid to bring up with friends in the place that I came from. That was very moving to me. And then I began going to classes, seminars for my master's course, and the people here are very busy. The workload is enjoyable but punishing. We would come, some of you know, punishing is, Foucault would say punishment could go one way or another. It can be good, it can be good for a person. It can expose power and systems of knowledge. But we would come out of a seminar and we're so busy. We have a paper due in 4 days, and we're coming out, and then we find ourselves standing in inclement weather talking about something heatedly for 15 minutes. And it was incredibly exciting. And one of the things that I think created potential here was simply being in a new space with people who self-selected to talk about these ideas. And you show up for your master's, and the other people in your class, you don't know where they are politically. You don't know how they perceive of their social role or function. Some grad students are a little older. Some people have children or were married. They are also working at the same time. And there's a way that our functions in terms of how they're perceived by other people can shape the way a person approaches us in terms of discourse. We had none of those cues to go off of, and that was extremely exciting for me. And when I heard from the people around the university, from Tala, about the forum, I was very excited. And I personally was excited to give the opportunity for other students to show up at events where that sort of fruitful chaos was something that we really dug into. And I invited to these events people from the reproductive rights student group, the Marxist group, the Republican group, groups based around certain issues, and also just people who are curious, people from the Institute of Politics, Center of Democracy. And they come in and they don't know who they're talking to. And it's incredibly exciting to watch someone, a Marxist and a college Republican, and someone who, and this is very exciting, someone who's perhaps not terribly acquainted with the issue we're discussing. Watch them all just get together and watch that fruitful chaos. And I wanted to create that opportunity. And then the hope was we would learn from each other in a meta sense how to sit in that discomfort and then move the culture, take this out into the world. So I see this not just as something we do here, but learning skills to engage out into the culture. We're learning a sort of resiliency we can bring to conversations in the wider world. And I think that's an opportunity that this university particularly presents.
Terrific. Thank you. Elizabeth, why don't I turn to you?
Yeah. So I think similar to Darius and Noel, I came to UChicago really interested in engaging in and fostering free and open discourse. My dad was an alum of the law school, and he had me read the Chicago Principles and the report of the Committee on Freedom of Expression that Jeff Stone wrote. And I remember writing in one of my essays that I really wanted to join a community where I could have discourse with students who had completely different views, came from completely different backgrounds. Maybe I would change my mind, maybe I wouldn't, but at least I would have kind of built up some knowledge in the process and maybe changed someone else's point of view. And so coming to the college for the first 2 years in the pre-forum era before Tom and Tala and everyone launched this wonderful institution, I tried to create that discourse in other spaces. And then I think in the spring of my second year, Tom and Tony, who's the executive director of the forum, were doing kind of focus groups with students about the state of free expression on campus, kind of things that we wanted to see. And I think that kind of birthed the student board. And I knew that I wanted to apply and kind of engage in more of this like discussion building. And I think our mission is really to bring in students from lots of backgrounds to have rigorous discourse so that they can practice free inquiry and expression within the walls of the forum building, and then take that and bring it to their classes, to conversations with friends, to like jobs and internships, relationships and everything post-grad. And it's been really exciting to see this year. I think we've hosted many events. There are some days when we have like 4 events for the student board across all divisions of the university, ranging on topics from challenging the Chicago principles or asking how we could maybe make them better to challenging, for instance, the lawyer who architected Trump's birthright citizenship policy, where we had law students from like the American Constitution Society challenging him and pushing him. I think he was like a little nervous, but I think, yeah, kind of speaks to the mission of the forum, and it's been really great to be a part of.
So why I joined the forum to begin with really goes back to why I came to UChicago. While I was applying to colleges, I read Coddling of the American Mind and iGen by Jean Twenge, and I thought to myself, whatever that is, I don't want that. So I applied to UChicago, and then what often happens for people in the sciences and also in other divisions as well is you kind of forget about everything else. I took my organic chemistry classes, my computer science classes, and I didn't really think about having conversations that mattered until I became a senior and had the time to really think and digest everything I already learned. And so the forum really offered that opportunity for me to host my friends and people I've never talked to about questions that matter, not so much as, what is this specific reagent, but why does it matter in terms of, what we will produce in this world and how we are, a part of this world together and not just, siloed in our own divisions and majors and double and triple majors. So it was really a time for me to come together with this campus and then also make sense of where I feel on many issues. And so it's been an incredibly great experience for me. I've learned way more than I've given. And I think that's kind of the UChicago way. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And so I am very thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I think the main thing that drew me to the forum partly was my undergrad experience. I went to undergrad here in philosophy, where we kind of just like the activity was like get at each other's throats, and that's productive and that's helpful actually. And then I came to Crown, and unfortunately that has not been my experience at Crown. Kind of just that that kind of speech has been suppressed, and then came the forum, and the forum to me kind of spoke to my experience as a psychotherapist, because I've been studying psychoanalysis, which the fundamental rule of psychoanalysis is that the patient should say whatever comes to mind as freely as they can without censorship. And the idea is basically that when there are parts of ourselves that are split off, that we disavow because they're offensive or shameful or even like morally corrupt, it seems, that those kinds of thought patterns and feelings and even personalities, that they can be acted out in destructive action. And basically the idea with psychoanalysis is that in listening to these voices and including them in the conversation, we can kind of take ownership of them and bring them into a conversation so that it doesn't need to be war, but there can be negotiation, and that kind of this process of speaking freely can itself be transformative, where that means that, just I think that's what the forum does, is that, as we're doing this right now, we welcome, criticism and debate, and all the feelings as well that arise with that, because it's kind of the experience itself can lead to the kind of experiences that are aimed at freedom and agency. And I feel like, unfortunately, like that's been kind of like lost at Crown right now. Not from everybody. There's some professors who still like really encourage kind of people giving voice to different views across the political spectrum. But yeah, I think the main thing is just that noticing, as a psychotherapist, that the kind of disordered thinking that I've seen, the kind of like, I mean, not to use too pathologizing language, but kind of the psychopathology that I've seen in people who've struggled with like the worst kinds of like, serious mental health conditions, that has been plaguing our culture. And I see the forum as like a way to treat the culture, and I think that we need something more than argument for that. We need an experience, something that's more bottom up rather than top down. And I think that the forum provides that experience, and that's what I'm hoping to do here. So thanks.
Thanks, Arian. Actually, your comment brings to mind something I've learned, which is how diverse this university is. So, I'm in the law school and I know something about social science, but I didn't really know much about Crown and Divinity and the Booth and all these other places. And what you learn is that, even though there is a common history of the university, the different cultures, vary from place to place. And so I actually want to stay with you, Arian, and ask a question, which is, I know all of you have organized events. You've had ideas, you've brought them to fruition. So what challenges have you found in that work, and perhaps what strategies did you use to overcome them?
Yeah. I would say the biggest challenge of this, okay, stop me if I'm going on too long or whatever, but because I have notes I prepared.
Speak
okay.
freely, please. Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, I think the biggest issue that I've seen is what I'm calling the manifesting view or magical thinking kind of view, and I think that this is something that I've seen in people I've worked with as well, my patients, where basically, it's a kind of like animistic worldview, and you can probably see this like in the culture right now that. Okay, so how do we think of like, thought basically in this worldview? This is what I've seen at Crown, unfortunately. Kind of that, what a view is kind of a power position, and the words and the beliefs and even like feelings associated with that view, that they're kind of rooted in these like power systems and oppressive systems, they call them, right? And that kind of what it is to even just like speak a view, like give voice to it, is to how do I put it? Like pledge allegiance to one of these systems or several of these systems, and also to breathe life and power into them. So, if I say like a certain word that has like a kind of, that has roots in, slavery or ableism, that even just like speaking that, giving voice to the view without like as I'm giving voice to it, criticizing it, that is kind of in a way like breathing life into the view and making it more real. So it's kind of like saying, like words become kind of like spells, like kind of like saying like abracadabra and, like kind of like godlike, like let there be light. Now it is here. This oppressive system, brought into full force, just like an object. And so then words become very dangerous, and it becomes very important to silence other people. And it becomes very important to, there's a place, maybe, I don't know if there's a place for making a statement about being thoughtful in a certain way, but then I do feel like I've seen that people kind of think that just, if they have a DEI statement, it's like, okay, we've done our part. We've like, kind of breathed life or power into these words, into the non-oppressive systems. So, we can go forward now. And I think that the main issue that I've kind of seen come out at Crown, comes out in this example actually from first day of class, my first year at Crown, pinned, kind of on our Canvas site, which is like a kind of software system that we have to keep track of documents, as if it's like, kind of like our commitment. It was called like a lexicon awareness document. All of these words that we're not supposed to use anymore. Like we're supposed to like shame each other out of using, landlord, master bedroom or whatever, just master, problematic is problematic because there's no ism attached to it. Like you're supposed to point out the ism. What else was there? peanut gallery because the people who were, in the peanut gallery tended to be like the poorest, which I think, of course it's important how we frame people, and words have power, obviously. And we do things with words, and reality, can be shaped by what we do with our words. But this idea that kind of, that we can't even give voice to certain views because even just giving voice to them is breathing life into them, giving them power. I think that has been the most dangerous, most dangerous kind of system or view, kind of psychological condition that has been plaguing Crown and also just the rest of the culture. So, yeah.
Thank you. Do any of the rest of you have challenges that you've run into? Max?
Yeah, I come at this from a different perspective. I'm interested in medicine and the sciences, and in medicine, having a viewpoint is actually a career. People who try to share a specific viewpoint on how a patient should be treated. We're in this era of evidence-based medicine, but that means you also have to choose what evidence you base your medicine on. So I hosted a wonderful event with a professor and two brilliant doctors here at UChicago, and one of them challenged that standard of care treatment and with his evidence. And that's all fine and well until you realize that people don't like that because they, like I said, build their careers off of this specific viewpoint. So in especially the sciences where the losing an argument is actually existential to your career, that creates a massive problem because we want to investigate in science and we want to challenge whether there is certainty in certain claims. And so being able to understand that, when we have an argument in science, that's not a chance for me to win over you. It's a chance for us to both learn. I think if we start adopting that viewpoint, that will be much better for society at large. And I've seen that to start to happen at the forum, which has been really promising, and I hope it continues afterwards too.
Noel?
Yeah, just following on with what you're both saying, and particularly Ariana, I've noticed this about words as well, and this is something we all see in the wider culture. And I think one way that I look at this sometimes is, what are we doing when we say, I have values? I'm a person with this value. And one way we can go about that is to make our value position a label, as in, this is who I am, and I essentialize myself as this person with this value. I might essentialize myself as, I'm a person who champions this value, right? And then you get into the words, and words sometimes are just another way of pointing, are you in this group wearing this label or this group wearing this label? To ground what I'm saying in something that's less abstract, let's say justice. Let's say I want to say I value justice. What's important really, I think, is what does that entail? And then you have a real discussion. So you value justice, what does that mean in the world for action? And then what you have to do is you have to drill down into particular circumstances. And I think in our discussions, we see a lot of these value debates, and they happen up here, and people are not talking about action in the world. I think it's very important when someone says, I'm upset about this injustice, you say, what is wrong? What are the particular circumstances? You get very granular and very specific. And I'm not saying that values in the abstract don't matter, but it avails no one anything if I sit alone in my room and I say, I have the best values in the world, and I keep them clean and unassailed because I refuse to talk to anyone who challenges me and I do not engage. If you get out in the world, you find that I think what's more important is getting things done. If you value justice, if you value anything, I think it must be because on some level you value people. And then you think, well, what is required to act appropriately or properly towards people? What are the obligations? And you need to engage in the world to understand that. And then when you practically engage in the world, whatever it is you're doing, then you go back and that informs your values, and you realize that the way you've been talking about something, you're situating yourself against others rather than potentially bringing people in to problem solve. And I think you can look at this at politics or socially, so on and so forth. Often we begin talking to someone and we hear, are they using this particular line, this particular label? Are they saying free speech or, whatever? These phrases become cathected, to use perhaps a word that you enjoy as a psychoanalyst, or in triggering. But we need to just ask, what do you want to do in the world? What do you want to accomplish? And make it more about practical action to achieve rather than setting ourselves aside and maintaining ourselves as pristine. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be a little bit morally dirty to discover that I am implicated somehow in wrongs, as long as I'm moving towards solutions. I'd rather be that person than to sit unassailed in perfect purity outside of conversation. So that's the way I think about this. Let's get specific and let's talk about real problems in action. So
I don't think my answer is as advanced as theirs, so but I'll try my best. Tom, I think when you ask about challenges, I can maybe offer a few practical ones. I remember my first student advisory board event like it was yesterday, but that was my second one.
There was one yesterday, yeah.
But it was back in January, the Jan 10th event, the college committee launch event. I think we named it Free Speech, a necessary tool or conservative propaganda. I thought that title would really get the masses going. But so the challenge came when, we looked at the RSVPs and we had maybe 90 people RSVP'd, and then the people start showing up for the event. And I'm looking out across the room, and there is such a big imbalance in the gender distribution. And this is something that I also noticed as a philosophy major. I'm sitting in my classes, and there are just like 13 men in the class with like 2 women, and one of the 2 women might be my professor as well. And I'm sitting in the event, and I'm looking across the room, and I'm just wondering, like, how can we find a way to get most of all the student body itself to engage in these discussions? But more importantly, I think it's imperative that we try to balance the distribution when it comes down to gender. And I think there is, unfortunately, in so many of these spaces where we have suppressed speech, it's widely accepted and widely the consensus that many of the conversations to be had about free speech are usually in a room full of men, particularly older men. And I think being at the forum or being on the student advisory board this year, although I haven't, I'll concede I haven't been able to make much of an effort to change this, I do think that in putting on these events, it's been something that I've noticed, and I think moving forward, hopefully the student advisory board in my absence, so sad, will be able to, one, get many more people to come to these events, engage the student body further, and also empower women to speak about their values and the opinions and the ideas that they hold, because I believe that free speech knows no gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you want to add anything, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would love to jump in. I remember noticing exactly the same thing at that event in January. And I remember we talked as kind of like the college committee afterward about like what we wanted to do. And I think part of the discussion that we had is that like free speech, when you hear it, so often kind of comes across as like we're saying that people should just come and say like whatever offensive things they want, and we're just gonna like give them a microphone and they're gonna talk for like an hour. And I think what we've realized is like in presenting events, it's really helpful to kind of say like, that's not exactly what we're doing. We're saying like, we're gonna have maybe like 2 or 3 different panelists who come at an issue from like multiple dimensions. And we're gonna get into that nitty gritty, like Noel said. And when it's not so much like a free speech conversation, but rather like a free inquiry and expression conversation, the vibe just becomes completely different. Like you're there to challenge ideas and ask questions and engage, not just kind of like listen to one person kind of say everything they think with absolute conviction and then hear another person say exactly what they think with absolute conviction and then leave. Like that's not productive discourse. And I think one thing that we've done to try to kind of bring in more like women to forum events, and like as a woman, I'm more attracted to the free inquiry and expression event than the free speech event, is kind of have conversations that touch on issues that like a lot of my friends care about, and also have like the women who are in leadership positions on the Forum Student Board lead those conversations. So we recently had one with a professor from the Harris School of Public Policy and Leila Brammer, who's now the Forum's Director of Curriculum, about the relationship between like First Amendment freedoms and movements for abortion rights and access. And it was a great conversation. I think a lot of gender diversity in the room, a lot of viewpoint diversity, and a lot of really strong and tough questions. And I think that conversation where like we had Professor Brammer bringing in kind of like her historical experience, and then the professor from Harris bringing in kind of like a policy and sociology lens, just exemplified like exactly what I love about the forum.
Can I follow up? So, I mean, one of our principles, I think, is that no one's views are uncontested. You know, that if you bring someone in, John Eastman is who you were referring to before, who came to talk about birthright citizenship. And actually, John has trouble appearing on campuses because of his role in the January 6th stuff. And of course, we're the University of Chicago, we welcome him, but we had students who were able to challenge him, and they did it. It was just an amazing event, really. But have you found that it's sometimes hard to get countervailing views, or has that been pretty straightforward?
I think maybe it's been hard, but all of our committee members and chairs make it look easy. We had a really great event at the law school, I think a couple months ago, where Jack Kefauver, who wrote, I think, the most read law review article this past year about judges and AI, came to talk to Professor Bode, who's an amazing legal scholar, and their debate, like I was on the edge of my seat. It was so interesting to hear it, and they were criticizing each other's views in kind of like the most kind of exacting way. And you could see the gears turning in every student's head, like, okay, so maybe like judges using AI would be good. Like maybe it would help to like kind of streamline textualism, but also like what values are imbued in the AI and like what would the result of that be? And all of the professors who we've reached out to at UChicago to be part of panels have been so willing to engage in those conversations. And I think it speaks to the ethos of the UChicago community.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I want to ask a question of all of you, or anyone who wants to answer. So you're all going forth into the world. Fly, young butterflies. How do you feel, or do you feel like these experiences have prepared you for challenges out in the world, in your post-graduation life? Anyone?
Yeah, I can start off. So one thing I'm sort of thinking of right now is like an argument. So what is the purpose of an argument? Well, some people want to win, and that implies that someone else will lose. And I think that what I've learned from the forum is that you can just start a conversation by saying, you know what, like I surrender. Like you're right. Let's like talk about your view, and then the entire premise of winning over somebody just immediately disappears. We're not talking about, the right winning over the left or the left winning over the right. We're just talking about the actual issues at hand. And so when I go out into the world, and for me, that will be science, and hopefully other things as well, I really want to first start by telling whoever I'm talking to, okay, like let's assume you're right, and then let's talk about, the issues at hand. And I think that viewpoint will help me, and I'll, hopefully get back to you guys in a future alumni event to see if that's actually working. But when it comes down to it, I have no goal to beat someone in an argument. I just want to learn from them, and so I think that's what I got from the forum.
Mm-hmm.
To follow up on that, something I'm bringing forward is something similar. With the forum, there's this question of how does this code politically, free inquiry and expression. There's a surprising number of people who still think the forum is called the free speech forum, but free inquiry and expression, that's what we do, that's important. So there are a lot of people I've got to come to events because it started out with them being angry. They're saying, for some reason, they don't like whatever they think the program is, whatever we're supposedly selling, they don't want it. But what I realized, one thing I'm taking forward, when someone comes in with anger is an opportunity. We feel anger and we want to resist or feel angry back. or we want to shut down or just frankly run away. But anger is heat, and heat means passion. And when someone comes at you angry, this is someone who cares about something. This is someone who has priorities, who has values, has something they're passionate about. That's the start of a really strong conversation. And if, like you said, if you can sit back, if you can actually just sit in that a little bit, it's very, very hard for someone to maintain a high level of fury with you if you actually are curious about them. Try this, they've got a really strong point of view. You want to push back to defend yourself. You just listen and actually get curious, and it gets really, really interesting very fast. They cannot maintain that anger. Apathy is a little more difficult. I think apathy is something that is worrisome. But when I look at the society I'm in, which is American society, I see a lot of anger. And I want to say that that's opportunity. This is a lot of people, whatever they're angry about, they care about something, they're passionate about something, and you just have to find a way to talk about that.
Can I add something on that? Yeah, I just find this so interesting because it makes me think again about psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, and also just what we call like containment. And this is also, just developmentally. When there's like a baby and they're experiencing like a chaotic kind of emotional experience, you usually see like the caregiver, and ideally like they kind of mirror in their face what the emotion is that the baby's experiencing, and kind of give it back to the baby in a kind of metabolizing, a kind of digestible form, something that shows like I understand, that you're angry or that you're sad, and here it is, and I'm able to metabolize it, and so can you one day or just not right now. That's really important, and we do that as psychotherapists too. That's what it is when we make reflecting kind of statements that say like I understand, or I'm working to understand where you're coming from, and here's what you seem to be experiencing. Here I'm going to give it back to you, and here's my understanding of it. And now we can, you can take it in and we can work with it together. And it's not like, some kind of just explosion that just, destructs and like acts out, but we can kind of metabolize it together. And that's a really important part, I think, of like what the forum does is that, we allow for containment to take place. That's what we're doing when we allow, anger to come up forcefully with the words that people choose, because of course the words people use, they are touching important parts of ourselves that have deep roots, and that allow us to experience certain states of mind that are important for us to experience in order for us to work through them. So I find that just really powerful.
And can I just ask a question? Just echo it back to see if I'm understanding you. What I'm hearing from you, it's very interesting to me. I feel like I'm hearing acknowledgement, like mutual acknowledgement, something like reciprocity. Mm-hmm. And what that speaks to for me is something like a relationship. And I think that's very important when we have a discussion with someone. We often think of it as a one-off. Like, this is the game. Mm-hmm. I'm going to win the game, or you're going to, I'm going to win or lose this game, and then we walk away. The tennis game's over. But if you think of it as a relationship, and you think of all of society like that, then two people can have a discussion, and no one can convince the other person of anything at all. But on a deeper level, you've had this mutual acknowledgement, which is a relationship. Yep. And that is incredibly fruitful. To sit there and talk with someone for 30 minutes, you've not convinced them, they've not convinced you, but you can both sit in your discomfort and relate to someone that doesn't totally agree as another person, mm-hmm. with that acknowledgement, and then move forward. And if you think of things as not one-off, but society is a rolling relationship like that, then I think there's nothing more important than that acknowledgement. And the notion of who wins almost falls by the wayside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes me think as well about like couples therapy as well. And like, obviously we know like there's some problems that just never go away. And what we do, when we're working with couples is, to help them just to have that kind of experience, to have the experience of being seen and heard and felt. And that is the relationship. And it's also what we do, in psychotherapy with just therapist and patient. Like the treatment is the relationship. And I think that's what we're doing at the forum as well. It's just we're building relationships, healing relationships.
So what do you think are the barriers to this in the broader society? I mean, it's hard enough on a campus, then we're, the actual United States. And I often say that if we can't do this on campus, there's really no hope for the rest of the country. But what do you think are the barriers out there? Elizabeth.
I think I'll start with what makes it a little bit easier to create these spaces for conversation on the university campus. The University of Chicago has students from so many different backgrounds, so many different places, who have so many different viewpoints. And so, we're really lucky to be able to, bring in all of those students for conversation. I think like societally, as I'm sure many of you often think about, like the people who we interact with have often very similar views to our own. We intake news and kind of social media that is meant to kind of make us think that we're right so that we keep reading or keep watching. And I think that the idea of engaging with people we disagree with who will kind of engage with us with rigor is kind of the opposite of that, the opposite of where we're going culturally. And so I don't know if I have like a solution to it, but I think one thing that I try to do on campus and something that I'm going to take with me into law school and beyond is like maintaining like friendships and relationships with people who I disagree with. I think one of the best things about the forum has been I've become really good friends with other members of the executive committee, and we, especially about law, think about things like completely differently. But I feel like I've grown so much as a future lawyer and as someone who thinks about law a lot now because I'm able to have those rigorous conversations and push back in a setting where like we're all kind of learning together. And I think that's something that I'm going to try to take with me beyond the university too.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
Sure.
I'll go. In terms of, the barriers to, I guess, fruitful or rigorous discourse in the United States, in the world, or, just even more locally on campus. I think it's the case, and I've experienced this before, that some people just don't want to have a conversation. And you cannot force people to talk. And on the other hand, you can't force people to listen either. But, I think it comes down to, the things that we're trying to accomplish here, with the Student Advisory Board, with the Chicago Forum, is, it's not necessarily, I'm not in the business of forcing people to talk to each other, but I want to know, and I'll sleep better at night by knowing that when these people do happen to sit down and have a conversation with each other, they're not just yelling at each other. I mean, although you said no, that anger is an opportunity and heat is an opportunity. I agree with that. I like it actually. But yes, I think it's more so just preparing them for these moments when these moments do arise. But again, I think the biggest barrier that I can see in my mind, and I think it's unfortunate more so the ways that this barrier happens to manifest itself when people don't want to talk to each other. They resort to just nonverbal things at all, which is usually physical force, or even worse, deadly force even. So yeah, I think if we lived in a world where everyone would want to talk to each other and could talk to each other, this would be easier. But until then, for me, I think the biggest barrier is the fact that some people just don't want to talk.
I have something about that as well. About you're asking about society as a whole, and this ties into what we were saying about the university. But very quickly, Elizabeth, you were saying earlier, you were talking about the different kinds of people who come to events and how you want to get the different viewpoints. I found one division is you can have a topic, pick a topic that's really hot. It's Israel, Gaza, something like this, right? And you have people that are really hot on it from this side and really hot on it from this side. And they consider it to be a binary. They consider it to be two sides. What's really interesting is trying to get someone to show up to that event who doesn't think about Israel, Gaza very much. And that's a big difference. Not like the pro and the con, but the person who's to the side. It's not a priority for them. And that was always a challenge, to get people in the room. It's easy to get a bunch of people in the room who haven't thought about a topic much. Let's say like open discussion. It's easy to get a bunch of people in the room who are hot, right and left on an issue. But you get the people who haven't thought about it much with the people who are really hot on an issue. That's very interesting to get them together. Now, how this ties into wider society is, I think, what you're talking about, how some people just don't want to talk. It's been a lesson to me, and I think about this a lot. At the University of Chicago, I will run an event, and I will run into people, and they're simply not interested in that. They haven't thought of it. Yet they're here. They have all the advantages of being here, the blessings of being a student here, having the time to think. and they still haven't thought about this. What about wider society when someone has a job, obligations, maybe they're a caregiver, there's family, they have to drop off the kids and then go to work and do this and et cetera. And are we expecting them to think about every single issue? And this is something that's important because it's very easy for people who focus on an issue to show disdain for people for whom it's not a priority. And I think this is a big division. But what can we expect? Do we expect greater society to pay attention to every single issue in great depth? We cannot do this. And this is why I think we need to learn to talk to people who do not prioritize an issue that's very important to us. And then if we talk to them, we might find that there's an issue that's very important to them that's not a priority for us. We have to realize that, and we have to realize that people have lives. But just what I want to point to is there's a lot of discourse and frankly like nastiness if you go online, but I do not believe that we are a society of sociopaths. If you really talk to someone, you talk to an Uber driver, talk to someone at the grocery store, bus, wherever you are, in the airport. Airports are really interesting. You get a good mix in an airport. Talk to someone on the plane. We're not a society of sociopaths. And even if your priority is not an intellectual priority for them, you let them talk about, oh, I dropped my kid off at childcare and they're raising the price and my boss is asking me to do this and whatever, they're always speaking in priorities. People always value something. So even when we don't think we're talking about politics and society, we always are. But I do think that that's one of the big challenges I've noticed. It's not just pro versus con, how do these people talk to each other, but how do you meet in discourse with someone who is situated in life differently from yourself with different obligations and responsibilities and still talk about what's a priority for them and what's a priority for you and try to connect through that. And I think a lot of politics, a lot of the nastiness is just misreading of these priority levels and misjudging someone for not foregrounding what is to the fore for you. That's my opinion.
I want to make sure we have time for you all to ask questions. And so if you raise your hand, we have some mic runners who will bring you microphones, and feel free to ask questions. So you guys can, the mic runners, why don't you pick by passing the mics to the...
Hi, I'm Rob Clefts. Yes, make sure it's up. I'm Rob Clefts. This is my 6th day of alumni.
Wow. Wow.
Awesome.
Looking around, I'm 4th at least when it comes to oldest alumni. The thing that I wanted to say was while I was here at UIC, one of the important things, excuse me, that's where I'm working.
Okay.
Habit. Was to prevent a discussion turning into an argument, first define your terms. I'll bring up the one term that is really hot now, Republican. Is a Republican a GOP Republican? Or is that a person a Trumplican? There's a big difference, and unless you define your terms, you're going to be arguing past each other about what's a Republican.
Thank you. Yes, it's an ancient technique in Indian philosophy that you always start by define your terms and then we can have a conversation. And I think it just points to the broader phenomenon that there's always boundaries. The word free speech, as Elizabeth said, doesn't really capture what we're doing. It's not just unconstrained discourse. There's always constraints, and one very helpful way to proceed is to define your terms. Hi.
So a quick question. This might be a softball question.
Could you introduce yourself too?
Yes, I'm Howard. Hi, everyone. I recently graduated, but yeah. So my question, I wrote it down, is in many contexts, right? We were discussing that. I think y'all were discussing this, whether it's being like a woman in a male-dominated philosophy seminar or being like in the political minority, right? So speech, right? Like what we say is shaped by like the anticipated reception, right? So like. I feel like a lot of times self-censorship often becomes a form of like this social navigation, right? So where like people just manage risk via selective expression or even just being silent altogether as a result, right? So maybe what strategies can we not as experienced free inquiry people use to cultivate environments, maybe particularly outside the university setting, where people feel able to express socially risky or norm challenging views. And really, like, how do we encourage open dialogue when so much of what people say is already pre-filtered through like social acceptability?
Do you want to take it, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think so. One thing that we've done for all of our forum student board events is we have like 7 or 8 bullet points we say at the beginning of the conversation about like, this event is off the record. Like, we really want you to engage, like, be like kind to people, tough on ideas. And I think that that's something that I've carried over into my own personal conversations about like contentious issues, whether I'm like at a dinner party with friends and something crazy comes up. And I think like first, like kind of like fronting conversations with this kind of caveat that like you're there to have a discussion about ideas. Like there's no judgment, nothing that like you say is going to leave the space or be used against you. And then also kind of trying to see areas of like agreement, whether that's like agreement about a problem or like even like one tiny thing out of 100 that you agree on. What else? And then I think also like trying to create like diverse spaces, if at all possible. Like one thing we try to do is it's a lot easier for students to feel comfortable kind of sharing different views if they're in a space where if there's a panel, like there are 3 panelists and maybe one of the panelists has hinted at a view that they might have. And so like not kind of coming at people with a like 5 versus 1 like ratio, but maybe more of like a nuanced crowd.
Please.
Victor Sloan, this is my 45th, so can't even compete with. So my wife is on our local school board. The vice president of the next board over truly believes that heliocentrism is false. So my question is, if the universities were to invite that woman here, are they not putting their imprimatur on that position? We can have differing opinions about certain things, but I would argue that that is a statement of fact, and there's no arguing with that. And so is there a point where the university is going to say, that's out of bounds because that's just not science?
Maybe I can take that one because we confront this all the time. In general, we have disciplines which tell us what's inside and outside. I can teach constitutional law, but I can't get up in my law class and teach the laws of physics. It's outside the boundary. But in terms of speakers, our general approach, and all of these folks have participated in this, is that we really do decentralize the power. And so if someone wants to invite, for example, John Eastman, a student wants to invite them, it's not for me to say that we're not going to do that, nor would I adopt the position that somehow the forum is endorsing his views by having him here. To the contrary, we're subjecting them to scrutiny. And the other view that any single person who shows up on the university is somehow endorsed by it would require some kind of central bureaucracy in Levy Hall that was scrutinizing every request to have someone here. And we've seen a little bit of that this year. I gave a talk at Indiana University where they had to run my CV through the provost's office. That's not conducive to what a university is. We have to get over the idea that everyone on campus is somehow endorsed. Everyone on campus should have their views challenged, but it's the nature of an open community that we can't really police everything. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark Schiller. I'm a relative youngster. It's my 40th reunion. I'm also on the board of an alumni free speech group that's formed, if anybody is interested. But one of the things we've done is we've been in close touch with FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And they did a survey of University of Chicago, which really surprised me. I mean, and I'm interested in all of your responses to this, is they found in a survey, which, and I don't know if it was scientifically done or not, but in any event, they found about 70% of the students thought it was okay to quash the speech with which you don't agree. And that actually 25% of them said that it was okay to use force to stop speech with which you don't agree. And I'm just wondering, I mean, are you seeing, outside of the Crown School of Social Work maybe, I'm just wondering, You know, if you as students have seen any evidence of this, and how do you respond to what Fire survey showed?
Does anyone want to take that?
Start. So, me personally, in my experience here in the college, I cannot say I've seen much evidence of this, and this might be solely because I've taken very particular type of class. After my third year of philosophical perspectives in my core, I almost never saw any of my friends again in class. But that was a choice, a sacrifice that I had to make. But yes, at least in my courses in the philosophy department, that is just not the case. Now my colleagues might have some.
Yeah. Has
I
anyone seen
would
that?
agree with you. There was an instance on campus maybe like a week ago where I don't remember what the title of the event was, but there was an event on the migrant crisis, and a member of President Trump's border security team was there. And there were a few students who showed up to the event and who were trying to shout down the speaker. It was like a student moderated conversation, not hosted by the forum, but by a different organization. And the general consensus of like all of the students in the audience, like the vast majority of whom disagree with the Trump administration's immigration positions, was that like they agree with the speaker's like kind of policy opinions, but they think that it's really disrespectful to kind of shut down an event or try to silence a speaker, especially when they're engaged in a conversation that's meant to challenge them and kind of like tease out kind of maybe weaknesses in their viewpoints.
Yeah.
So that hasn't been my experience at the college, and based on, because it's something that I've been talking about with a lot of students in this past week, I don't think it's the view of most students in the college now.
Let's go to another question.
Thank you. I'm Rosabel Young, class of 82 and 84, Biological Sciences Division. I was born in this country, but when I was a toddler, we went to Europe, and I grew up there until the age of 11. We lived in Barcelona. The issue of open discourse, the philosophy is totally different from here in the States. And when I came here, I found myself quite oppressed and punished, not quite corporally punished, but definitely bullied in school. Luckily, I had the oasis of the University of Chicago for 6 years. But then when I left, I again felt I was exiting into an oppressive world of the United States. And I didn't know how to carry on those ideals of the open discourse and basically impart them upon my environment so that this environment wouldn't become oppressive to me again. As a result, I've moved to Barcelona. I live there again. I couldn't stay here. What could I have done?
Wow. Anyone want to take that on?
All right. Apparently, I'm supposed to answer.
Yes. This is backwards advice.
As to why not to go to Barcelona. You could bring me to Barcelona and I could check it out. Fund me for a year or two. We can. I'm very happy to hear whatever your positions on philosophy are, and I can get back to you about the differences. But really, this is a hard thing to do, and I always remember that. It's easy to say, "Look, sit in discomfort," and so, but discomfort is uncomfortable. It's terrible, and it sounds like you had a hard experience. And I'm going to be frank, I have a hard experience. To touch on the question that came up earlier about how healthy is free discourse here. It's extremely healthy in the university, and I have this same problem. There's a sort of decompression process I have to go to when I leave the Hyde Park area, like into America. I get in trouble with friends. I'll say like, "Oh, tell me more about that," and they're like, "What, are you on that side?" Or it's very difficult. And usually when we talk about free speech, it takes this kind of legalistic slant. But I think most of this happens at the cultural level, and I'd be very interested in hearing about resources that people have to deal with that. I just want to tie it in with the school board issue. I think I was hearing that there's someone who has a geocentric view of the universe. Just in terms of that, I understand it can be very personally frustrating, but I think this is partially not a solution, but a way to cope. I think that's interesting. Like, there's a way I could maybe get angry about that, and there's a way I could get curious. There are a lot of people out there on the internet who are flat earthers. In answer to the question, I myself, for the events I run, I would be interested in running an event with someone who has a geocentric view of the universe or a flat earth view. get in a couple religion professors, get in someone who believes, the standard view of the universe. I think that's interesting. So all I can offer is, it's difficult, but if you can make yourself curious, you can end up talking. But I do understand it can be personally hard. Other than moving to Barcelona, I don't know if other people have.
Yeah. Well, let's keep the questions coming. There's so many good questions. So please.
Tim Lyman, class of 74. I have my biggest source of pride in the university, and I never miss a chance to talk to people about it, was in fact the Chicago principals. And as I said, it's been a big source of pride for me when I talk about the university, but I'm not so sure anymore. So I've been really pretty disappointed, amazingly disappointed, at the silence of the University of Chicago in the current attacks on university and freedom of speech and DEIs. Mm-hmm. And then I found out last week that one of your board of trustees is a member of DOGE, working in the Social Security office and a longtime friend of Elon Musk, which really surprised me. And I have to ask the question of whether there's a connection between having somebody on DOGE on your board of directors and the silence of the university. So my question to you guys is, in the forum, because the title of this is putting theory into practice, has the forum discussed any of these things in particular and what the university perhaps should be doing that it isn't doing?
Yeah, I've got things to say, but Elizabeth?
Yes. We definitely have. Darius led an amazing event yesterday with Professor Stone talking about the Chicago principles, and I think we have ongoing discussion on the board about what does implementing those principles look like, and all of us, I think, have different views. One of the great things I think about the way that the university has responded, even though they haven't said anything about the Trump administration, I think maybe there was an email, is that it frees up faculty to kind of express their views and engage in the conversation. I think every 3 New York Times articles I read is quoting a law professor from UChicago and kind of their explanation of why something is unconstitutional. And it's a constant source of discussion. Professor Ginsburg hosted a conversation about academic freedom. And I think right now we have even more students engaging with the forum right now across disciplines because of how students in the biological sciences, physical sciences, whose research funding was cut, are curious about what academic freedom means and how they can get involved in the conversation and politics and advocacy.
Yeah, I'll just add one very quick thing, which is, of course, the Calvin report has an exception in it. And it says that from time to time there are moments when our community of fundamental inquiry is under threat, and then the university must act. And I'm very confident. I mean, it's all above my pay grade. It's Levy Hall. I'm very confident that they are, acting and communicating, but not necessarily signing on to these public statements. I don't really have a view about that, except with regard, from my point of view, I publicly said this at a forum event we had for faculty only, that the immigration issue in particular requires us to speak out internally in the sense that, anyone who's not a natural-born U.S. citizen suddenly is feeling like they can't fully speak out. And then that immediately has a chilling effect on our conversation. So I see that as the existential issue immediately. But above that, it's above our pay grade. Over on this side.
Hi, my name is Shelley Nason. This is my 25th reunion. This is a little bit of follow-up on geocentric guide, but so I was in a philosophy major. It's probably simplistic to say that there's the distinction between facts and opinion, but still there does kind of feel to be okay, so if you're arguing with someone whose facts you're pretty sure are wrong facts, that's different than just arguing about opinion, or maybe it feels like it may be. So I guess I question, in the forum, so you guys are all very well educated. In the forum, do you ever have times when people are arguing, don't seem to be agreeing on the facts? And then just more generally, when you go out in the world and you have to try to talk to other people, what are good ways to talk to people when you think that they have the wrong facts? And sorry, hat guy. I'm sorry, I'm referring to people rudely. Talked about that a little bit.
Hat guy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you.
He always has it, by the way. It's always on.
Yeah, that's hat guy. It is on YouTube. It'll be hat guy. Hat guy talks.
Yeah.
I'll start at the end, which is how to talk to people in the world with the facts and opinions distinction. At the university, I feel like facts are easy because we're always pushing around facts all the time. So people are happy to correct each other on the facts. It's what you do with the facts. That's usually where the rubber meets the road in terms of this. Out there in the world, I know what you're talking about when you're at the proverbial Thanksgiving dinner you read about, but these really happen, and you've got some great uncle, and it's like, oh, do you know the Ukrainians are building something on the moon to whatever, and it's very difficult to disprove that. That was a fun Thanksgiving for us, but it's very difficult to disprove that. But then I would still go to the same place, which is, let's say the Ukrainians are building bases on the moon for what have you. How does this impact your life? Why do you care? What is the challenge? And and then they have to say, well, that's going to affect, you know what, your county taxes are going to go up or something like this. And then you have like what is a more grounded discussion. Is this getting it all to what you're asking? And then the other thing, what Elizabeth was saying before, you rolled through many tactics you use, but you said something like out of 100 points someone makes, if you can find one, and I feel like this is where like the human relationship and the mutual acknowledgement that Ariana brought up comes in. Someone can spew 99 crazy things at you, but if there's one in there that you find the least bit challenging, I always tell myself, I go first, as in I get challenged first. So I'll say, that one thing you said, that makes me feel a little destabilized because I'm beginning to question something I've thought for a long time. When you said that, I began to wonder about something, and I've never even realized that this belief of mine might not be on entirely solid ground. Can you tell me more about that one thing? And there we've put away the Ukrainian bases on the moon or what have you, and we've got it something interesting, and that's always a way in. And that's one thing that's not crazy that you can build on and talk about. And I think that's it. Facts matter because of values, and if you talk to someone long enough, you'll ask them, why does this matter? And they're going to ground it on something that is a mutually recognized reality you can discuss.
All right. Well, I know there are many more questions, but we've come pretty much to the end of our time, so I just want you to join me in thanking these fantastic students.